Gentlemen, today the Prime Minister not just set a grand strategy to where we ought to be in 2047, he also spoke about the 5 ingredients which will take us there. The 5 pran, the 5 pledges that each one of us should commit ourselves to. Here is what he said, and then let's debate.
The journey to independence wasn't smooth or easy. And when India declared independence 75 years ago,
today is a great day for us in India. It marks the end of one chapter and the opening of yet another. And let us hope the most glorious chapter in our history. Let us prove worthy of this freedom.
many foresaw doom for the newly formed nation, but India thrived.
स्वदेशी से स्वराज, स्वराज से सुराज, ये उनका मंत्र है। हम सबको सोचना होगा कि हम कब तक दुनिया के और लोगों पर निर्भर रहेंगे। क्या हमारे देश का अन्न की आवश्यकता हो, हम आउटसोर्स कर सकते हैं क्या? जब देश ने तय कर लिया कि हमारा पेट हम खुद भरेंगे, देश ने करके दिखाया कि नहीं दिखाया? एक बार संकल्प लेते हैं तो होता है।
India went from carrying rocket parts on cycles to launching over 400 satellite missions.
And lifting away from the launch pad towards a target.
India went from electricity in just 3,000 villages to being at the cusp of 100% electrification. India went from a global GDP share of just 3% during independence to a 100% increase, accounting for 7% of the world's GDP.
India is a world leader in demonstrating economic development, and clean energy is not a zero-sum choice, one or the other. You can do them both at the same time.
India cannot be ignored anymore. And now, the Prime Minister has set the vision for the next 25 years.
आने वाले 25 साल के लिए हमें उस 5 पंच प्राण पर अपनी शक्ति को केंद्रित करनी होगी, अपने संकल्पों को केंद्रित करना होगा, अपने सामर्थ्य को केंद्रित करना होगा और हमें उन पंच प्राण को लेकर के 2047 जब आजादी के 100 साल होंगे, आजादी के दीवानों के सारे सपने पूरे करने का जिम्मा उठा करके चलना होगा।
Petty politics cannot mar India's vision for 2047. Let's debate.
We now have our political debate on the Prime Minister's speech. Well, I can only say there should be occasions when there should be no politics. But we don't live in an ideal world. Pawan Verma, good to have you with us. We have Ghanshyam Tiwari with us of the Samajwadi Party. Mr. Pawan Verma resigned recently, I think day before yesterday, from the Trinamool Congress, and there is no real suspense on his next destination. Some people say he's going to be back with Nitish ji, but anyway, he continues to be a prominent voice in our national political fabric. And to take them on will be Dr. Sudhanshu Trivedi, Member of Parliament of the Rajya Sabha, Senior National Spokesperson of the Bharatiya Janata Party. I want to start with Pawan Verma. Pawan ji, the Prime Minister is spot on the broad framework. I feel he's laid out a very grand vision for where we should be 25 years from now. He's spoken about individual responsibility, pride and cultural heritage, unity, responsibility of the citizen, and he's talked about a Viksit Bharat. But he has also talked about the things that pull us back. And principle there is the fight against corruption. I know that the opposition parties have been trying to politicize the action against the corrupt recently. But the Prime Minister has called on the people. And he has said that we have reached a very critical point Nirnayak point in the fight against corruption. And he has also said, Mr. Verma, I have to intensify the fight against corruption. So if the opposition parties thought that by criticizing the agencies that will stop, I don't think so. In fact, I think the sense I get is that the fight against the corruption, prosecution against the corrupt will only intensify despite all opposition pressure. That's the sense I got. What's your takeaway from that?
First of all, Arnab, I completely endorse what you have said, that there are some occasions when we celebrate a milestone rising above partisan politics. And today is one such day. Today is the 75th anniversary of our independence. We have reasons to be proud of the fact that we have not only survived as an independent nation, but have survived as a democracy and made significant strides in many diverse fields. Let me also say, the Prime Minister was, as usual, at his eloquent best. And he spoke in this speech in particular. This speech was full of idealism. It was not one of making grandiose promises. We will double farm incomes by the next 2 years. But it was about idealism. And some of the points he mentioned, I fully support. For instance, this point that he said of Gulami. Gulami, as I understand it, and I hope the Prime Minister meant it in that form, is from any vestige of colonially imposed inferiority. You know, the success of colonialism lies not in your physical subjugation, but in the colonization of your mind. And while the countries become independent, it takes a long time to get rid of that sense of heenta, that sense of lack of pride in who we are in the attempt to emulate the ruling power or what it represents. So therefore, I think that these are important points he made on unity, integrity, on paying due, taking note of our grand heritage. Having said that, you have first raised the issue of corruption. I think the Prime Minister has touched an important point. We have to take a strong and resolute stand against corruption, especially in politics. But I do believe that this important message will carry greater credibility if the pervasive perception is not that it is somewhat selectively targeted against the political opponents of the regime. Now, you will say I am politicizing it, but I want to say to you, I'm talking perhaps of perceptions and also of facts. Let me give you an example. Since 2014, there have been 609 cases against political leaders. Of these, 570 draconian laws and other provisions of the law have been slapped. 570 out of 609, only against those who are the political opponents of the regime or are critical of it. Then, there is a perception, while I fully support the Prime Minister on his muhim, his campaign against corruption, that those who join the BJP are somehow cleansed of what their corruption was. Let me give you the example of Himanta Biswa Sarma. Nothing personal, but the BJP carried out a sustained campaign against Himanta Biswa Sarma for his involvement in a water supply project in Guwahati. They published a booklet on his many corruption allegations. And they said that we will take this matter to the CBI. Mr. Sarma changes sides, joins the BJP. The BJP forgets about its own promise or resolve to take it to the CBI. Mr. Sharma is seemingly cleansed and he's now the Chief Minister of Assam. Let me take another example. You have the case of Suvendu Adhikari. He was interrogated by the BJP in his involvement in the Sarda Narda scam in 2014. After he has joined the BJP, there has been no further interrogation. And he is today the leader of opposition of the BJP. I can give you more examples. Mr. Yadurappa, against whom were many serious charges, he was made a chief minister in spite of it. So what I am saying is that when we speak of corruption, we support the Prime Minister. But it should not be perceived as a corruption being pursued only against those who are political opponents, and it should include that rare capability of looking into the mirror yourself. So, since you raised corruption, I'll end here. There are other issues I want to speak of.
Okay. I would let those two specific instances be responded to by Sudhanshu Trivedi. My only counter comment at this point, and I'm not putting this as a question to you, just an observation before Sudhanshu Trivedi responds to you. This definition of political opponents is very sweeping and very broad, Mr. Verma, and the danger is it can end up including a Nawab Malik, who is believed to be holding on to properties or properties associated with people linked to Dawood Ibrahim. It can end up including, for example, a Rana Ayub, who would be a quote-unquote, in your definition, a political opponent of the government, but who collected money in the name of COVID and then put it in individual bank accounts. So the clear counter would be, do people who qualify as political opponents of the regime, do they get a free hand? Or should the cases of corruption prior 2014 be disregarded? These are just two counter thoughts of mine, but Sudhanshu is dying to respond to you. Sudhanshu Trivedi, please.
In the last 75 years, sir, forget about on the various ministers and the leaders. If there was an allegation of corruption on the prime ministers, it was not under our government. You remain for the first time during Indraji's regime, the Nagrawala case, there was a suspicion of doubt. Then Rajiv Ji's regime, Bofor's case, direct allegation on the Prime Minister. Then P.V. Narasimha Rao, he has to appear in the court of law on various allegations of corruption. And during the Manmohan Singh's government, the famous caged parrot word came for what? When coal is scammed, the CBI was to file the affidavit and they said that it was called by Prime Minister office officials, PMO's officials to it. So it means all the time the allegation was on the others, whether we are in power or they are in power. So it is the basic fundamental question of corruption. It's not the question of getting cover. And one more thing, Prime Minister has said कि भाई हमें भ्रष्टाचारियों को महिमा मंडित करने से भी रोकना होगा. क्यों? There was several times an allegation, then उसको glorification, and it is also connected to परिवारवाद. जब परिवारवाद, भाई भतीजावाद या जातिवाद आता है, that lays the legitimacy of justifying corruption. Right or wrong, my man is strong. So that's why Prime Minister has put both the things together. That if the youth wants to come up and should get a clear-cut, open, transparent, equally available opportunity to usher in every field, then these two menaces, the corruption and the family fiefdom, should be done away with. This is nothing to do with politics. If we want to make India next 25 years our legitimate due, we are there by 2047, sir, not to become the superpower of the world. China may be rising to dominate the world, but we are going to rise to motivate the world. And the first example was after 2014, जब योगा दिवस आया, तो आज बताइए क्या है? चाइना का राइज होता है, हर आदमी घबराता है कि मुझे दबा न ले. योगा है. Forget about nations, even persons get motivated for both their health and spirit. So that is just but a glimpse. Or 2025 mein one more thing. Today we are the only country which gives a message that we do not want to dominate, subjugate or annexation. From where? Ram Mandir जिस दिन बन के तैयार होगा, भगवान राम ने जब लंका का विजय प्राप्त किया, has he done annexation? No. Has he done subjugation? He has not appointed any of his deputy or viceroy. Has he forced Lanka to have any contract, means domination? No. It is just the set of values that have been established, and then you go ahead. That's why even the entire geopolitics of the world, our ancient virasat, जो उन्होंने बोला, वो हमारी विरासत ही दुनिया को वो प्रेरणा देगी. That's why this was a very pious, very appropriate and a very epoch-making era in which we are entering, which Prime Minister has called Amrit Kal.
Yes. You know, I also must mention here, viewers, we saw pictures of the National War Memorial. I don't want to politicize this, but we must remember that the Vadra Congress had opposed the setting up of a National War Memorial near India Gate. They said it should be a hangout zone. This is a change in mood, a change in perspective. We cannot disregard it. But I'd like Ghanshyam to come in at this stage. Ghanshyam, see, the argument that Pawan Verma made, why are BJP leaders not getting arrested or why are they not being caught for corruption is the broad argument. But you see, there has to be a case. There is nothing called some opposition leaders when they were in power have been found to be corrupt. Hence, we need to catch an equal number of people from the ruling party. That logic does not work. In fact, on the case of Himanta Biswa Sarma, a point raised by Pawan Verma, where Mr. Verma forgets to mention that there is no document, no evidence, no electronic evidence, no physical evidence, which has been found even in the Congress time to prove any financial benefit to him. But it has become part of folklore. So there is no evidence. There has been no evidence. The agencies earlier or now have not found any evidence. The individual has joined the investigations, is a witness, is cooperating, but it becomes part of the narrative. Hence, therefore, this question of being equal on corruption does not hold, Ghanshyam, because you cannot compare this prime ministership with the prime minister of Manmohan Singh. Manmohan Singh legitimized corruption. Manmohan Singh said corruption has become necessary because he said it's a compromise of coalition politics. These were his words. So we can't equalize the two, but yes, please, Ghanshyam.
Arnab, a very happy Independence Day to you, my fellow co-panelists, and every one of your viewers. And let us hope with determination and self-belief that our joint efforts will make the country developed. Our joint efforts will build a better nation for the future generation. As far as the Prime Minister's speech is concerned, I was just looking at the first speech. If you look at the Government of India website, it gives you the first speech of the first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru ji. Do you know, Arnab, how many minutes did he speak? You know how long that speech is? And does anybody know here? The speech is 4 pages. 4 pages. Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru spoke 17 times. Indira Gandhi spoke 16 times. Lal Bahadur Shastri spoke 2 times. And you look at all those speeches, and they were brief speeches. The point I am trying to make is, when you have substance, you speak with brevity and clarity. If the Prime Minister of India had substance, in 10 minutes he will say that in 2014 I promised this, here is the delivery. Here is the black money, 15 lakh rupees. Here is the 2 crore jobs. Here is the bullet train. Here is the doubling of farm income. Here is the house for every individual. Here is the proof of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas. Instead, there is a 90-minute lecture. And there's a media revision of this 90-minute lecture. There is a saying, नाम बड़े और दर्शन छोटे, या बड़ा बड़ाई ना करे बड़ा न बोले बोल, रहीमन हीरा कब कहे लाख टकामा मोल. Every one of us went to school on 15th August and on 26th January, we celebrated Independence Day and we brought that celebration home with the sweets. There was never a display that show me, I doubt you, you have to prove your nationalism. This government has instilled a doubt in every citizen's mind, and they have given a license to BJP that they will come and give you the certificate of nationalism. What have they done? What have they achieved in these 9 years? Has the poverty reduced? Do Indian youth feel that they will get jobs? They tell the parliament that 22 crore jobs, youth applied and 7 lakh got jobs. And you talk about corruption, Arnab? Please tell us, where are you right now? You must be in Mumbai. Do you think the government in Maharashtra was made out of charity? The neighboring Goa government is made out of charity? Gujarat, the election was won out of charity? And these legislatures who went to Assam, your home state, did they go and conduct charity? BJP is today at the core of corruption in India. They in their blinded mission to become the richest party in India and the richest party across the world, they have become the core of corruption. Look at Transparency International. So I think it is important at this stage of the nation, when everybody listens to the parliament, to the prime minister, that he speaks truth. We don't want our prime minister to be a hollow man whose words do not matter. We want him to speak with brevity, with clarity on words that matter. And as far as Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru ji is concerned, in 1934, his book Glimpses of World History came. Letters written from Naini jail, Bareilly jail, to his daughter, speaking about how women in India will build the new India. What are we talking about? He is repeating what was said in the first speech, कि मैं प्रथम सेवक हूँ. 75 years later, he's repeating the idea of women leading India 90 years later. And we are here to sit and clap and forget what he said 8 years back, 9 years back, 5 years back, 6 years back. I think it is important the Prime Minister faces the truth in this nation if we want to build the nation forward.
Okay. Now, if you finished before Sudhanshu speaks and Abhishek comes in, I would like to say a few things. 3 things, in fact. Yes, this country has changed, Ghanshyam, and it's changed a lot. Because prior to 2014, you know what the mindset was which was allowed by the previous government? तुम कितने अफजल मारोगे, हर घर से अफजल निकलेगा. And that was seen to be freedom of expression. Allow me to complete. It was seen to be freedom of expression. If you questioned it, you were told it's an aberration. You were told it did not happen. So I think it was a complete compromise with the sovereignty of this country which was allowed, which nobody would dare to today. Second point, corruption. Ghanshyam, you mentioned corruption. You mentioned the corrupt. We are today in the 8th year of the Modi regime. Let me remind you, because you may not have been in politics then, but I was in journalism. By the 6th year of the UPA government, the stench of corruption was nauseating. The dirt and stench of corruption, uski boo, sahi nahi ja rahi si. CWG, 2G, Devas Isro, a prime minister who shamelessly sat in a press conference and said, these are some of the compulsions of coalition politics, who institutionalized corruption and cravenly became a situation where he was agreeing to the acts of Sonia Gandhi, who was busy taking first-class upgrades from Vijay Mallya, and a prime minister returning from a foreign trip saying, we have to save Kingfisher Airlines. You talk about corruption. You have no idea how neck deep and dirt there was as far as corruption was concerned. And now, let me lastly come to the issue of sovereignty and national pride. A government, a bunch of politicians who compromise the country's security. The one thing you promise not to give up. You talk about coalition governments. I.K. Gujral, who committed the sin of dismantling all our foreign intelligence assets. Whose women fancy was he running to? Did the Congress not support him? Did I.K. Gujral ever take acceptance for ruining our sovereign interest? Did the Congress ever apologize for not building the infrastructure right up to China? And ensuring, do they have any right to talk about what's happening in the borders? In fact, I would say it will take us some time. But if we all work together, we will be able to undo the dark deeds prior to 2014 in a quicker way than possibly has been possible so far. Now, Sudhanshu can respond. I had to respond to Ghanshyam Tiwari because Ghanshyam, remember, the Bharat Tere Tukde Honge angle did not happen without 70 years or less than say 70 years of allowing it to happen. The Burhan Wani sympathizers did not creep up overnight. Gautam Naulaka did not celebrate Mannan Wani in Aligarh Muslim University overnight. It was allowed. And today, as much as what we talk about, you want to talk about where we are. I'm surprised you're a young politician. You don't know where we are. As a country, Ghanshyam, we are the first country to succeed in maiden interplanetary mission. Were you not there? We are the first country. You don't know where we are, the fifth largest nominal GDP. Third in purchasing power parity terms, the only economy of this scale to defy every single global economic trend. You talk about where we are. You know where we are, but the problem is, Ghanshyam, you are not there. You know where we are. You are not there. You are not in power. You talk about where we are. You know exactly where we are. In the global narrative, Pawan Verma knows where we are when it comes to climate change. When it comes to the G8, the G20, he knows where we are and where we will be also in the future. Problem is, can you be generous enough to say, even if we are not there, we will take pride in where the country is. Now it's over to Sudhanshu, and let Abhishek and Sudhanshu take the debate forward. I'll step back, otherwise I'll continue for a long time. Yes, please.
No, Arnab, before responding to what Ghanshyamji has said, I would like to say two sentences. When I have seen this war memorial, the thought came in my mind. हमें तो हिस्ट्री में यही पढ़ाया गया ना कि हमारा इतिहास सिर्फ हारने का है. The fact of the matter is, we are the country who defeated Alexander, then subsequently Seleucus, then Demetrius, then Menander, all the Greek invaders. Then we defeated Shaks, then we defeated Parthians, then the Huns, which have squandered the entire Europe, has got such a befitting reply by Samudragupta here, they got defeated. Then the Arabs, which has squandered the entire Middle East, they got defeated by Bappa Rawal. Then these Turks, they got defeated. Then the Afghans got defeated. Then the Mughals came, and they took around 600 years, 712 Muhammad bin Qasim came, 1527 when Babur tried to control. Then Dutch, then Portuguese, then Britishers. Such a long time of struggle for fight, and still we survived, only surviving civilization of the ancient world. The war memorial gives me an inspiration. That's what the country we were. Now coming to the allegation, he has said when the substance is there, it's a very small thing can be said. Yes, Jawaharlal Nehru ji has said 14th, 15th August night, tryst with destiny, sir. But I would like to remind 1.5 to 2 million people were massacred. And 1.5 to 1.75 crore people have left their home. This is the biggest exodus in the documented history of the mankind. और दुनिया की बड़ी से बड़ी blood revolutions में इतना खून रक्तपात नहीं हुआ. Even when Moses moved from Egypt to Judea, ये 1.5 करोड़ लोगों का उल्लेख नहीं है. तो ट्रिस्ट ऑफ द डेस्टिनी हमारी ये थी, जो 1.5 से 2 मिलियन लाशों के ढेर और 1.5 से 2.25 करोड़ बेघरबार हुए लोगों की सिस्कियों पे टिकी थी. This was the substance of tryst of destiny. So that's why if we want to do politics, its situation is different. As far as Modi ji is concerned, from where we have come, sir. अभी अर्नब ने बताया भारत तेरे टुकड़े होंगे, छोड़ दीजिए. ये बताइए मौत का सौदागर 2007 और मोदी जी की बोटी बोटी काट डालूंगा 2014. Then just few months back, मौत की कामना, फिर हिटलर की मौत, कुत्ते की मौत, क्या क्या नहीं बोला गया. And still you look at the person who has not taken even a leave for one day and relentlessly working for the country. इसलिए जो आपने बोला था ना, मैं रहीम का दूसरा दोहा सुनाता हूं. जे बड़ेन को लघु कहें, नई रहीम घट जाएं, और गिरधर मुरलीधर कहें, महिमा बदलत ना आए. इसका मतलब बड़े व्यक्ति को, जो मोदी जी के लिए आप करने का प्रयास कर रहे हैं, छोटा सिद्ध करने का कितना भी प्रयास करिए, वो छोटे नहीं होते. भगवान कृष्ण को इतना बड़ा पर्वत उठाने वाला गिरधर कहिए, या छोटी सी मुरली उठाने वाले मुरलीधर, उनसे कोई प्रयत्न नहीं पड़ता. एज फार एज करप्शन इज कंसर्न, सर, विद ड्यू रिस्पेक्ट, यू आर द ओनली पॉलिटिकल पार्टी जिसमें एक ऐसे नेता भी हुए, गायत्री प्रजापति, जो BPL, बिलो पॉवर्टी लाइन से इन ए स्पैन ऑफ 1 decade हैज बिकम द ओनर ऑफ 150 crore ऑफिशियली डिक्लेयर्ड प्रॉपर्टी without doing any job, without doing any business. And still, if somebody wants that the cases, I would like to remind, ये 2G का केस मुलायम सिंह जी पे कब विड्रॉ हुआ? जब 2G पे UPSC की रिपोर्ट जिस दिन डिस्टर्ब की गई, Within 72 hours, the case was diluted. And second, जब nuclear deal का समर्थन किया in July 2008, the case was subsequently withdrawn. So everybody knows the history where even we were not in power, still the charge of corruption was on your party. And still when we are in power, you try to put an allegation that why it is not equal. अरे मैं तो कह रहा हूं हम पावर में नहीं थे तब भी इक्वल ही नहीं था. हमारे किसी नेता पे कोई करप्शन का चार्ज नहीं था. तमाम स्टेट्स में हम पावर में थे, उसमें भी किसी के ऊपर कोई करप्शन का चार्ज नहीं था. There are two things, wild allegation and substantive allegation. If there is a substantive allegation, definitely it will happen. और मदद करना जानते क्या होता है? In the last few months of UPA 1 government, Ottavio Quattroci's Red Corner notice was virtually done away with in Argentina, जहां हमारी extradition treaty नहीं थी. Instead of reissuing the Red Corner notice, rather than we have immediately transformed all the money in the account of Quattroci. गजब था साहब fight with corruption. हमारे ऊपर allegation था क्या? मतलब बजाय उस पर दोबारा रीकेस करने के पैसा भी फटाफट कर दिया गया. इसलिए मैं कह रहा हूं आज की डेट में छोड़िए, आज की डेट में हम आगे बढ़ने की बात करें और ये हम समझें कि व्हाट वर द इनहेरेंट स्ट्रेंथ ऑफ आवर कंट्री. एंड आई वुड लाइक टू से, हम ये नहीं कहते कि हमने नहीं पाया, बहुत से हमारे पूर्ववर्ती सरकारों ने भी बहुत कुछ किया है. अटल जी की पंक्ति के साथ मैं बात समाप्त करने का प्रयास करता हूं. 15 अगस्त का दिन कहता आजादी अभी अधूरी है, सपने सच होने बाकी हैं, रावी की शपथ न पूरी है. रावी पर ही कांग्रेस के अधिवेशन में पूर्ण स्वराज्य का उद्घोष हुआ था. 15 अगस्त का दिन कहता आजादी अभी अधूरी है, सपने सच होने बाकी हैं, रावी की शपथ न पूरी है. स्वतंत्रता को सार्थक करने कमर कसें, बलिदान करें, जो पाया उसमें खो न जाएं, जो खोया उसका ध्यान करें.
Okay, I want Pawan Verma to respond and then Abhishek to take this forward. Pawan Verma, would you got the point. I don't need to paraphrase what he just said. Your response, please.
Well, first of all, I'm glad that Sudhanshuji quoted Atal Bihari Vajpayee. He is aware that I have a very high level of respect and admiration for him. And I had the great privilege of translating, on his request, his poetry from Hindu into English. And I think that he is a very apt person when he ends those lines by saying, "Jo paya hai usko khoye nahi, aur jo khoya hai usko paale." Now, I will just add to this. I'm happy the Prime Minister quoted two Mahavakyas of a kind from our past civilizational history, which is great. I have a book called The Great Hindu Civilization. The Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. It's a remarkable thought in the time when it was enunciated. And it speaks of a perspective which is, in spite of differences, inclusive, tolerant, accommodating, plural. We need to ask today, and I don't mean it always as a criticism, today is not the day. Are we today a more inclusive republic? Or are we riven by completely unnecessary and sterile divides based on, for instance, religion? The Prime Minister used another of the great sayings, Ekam Satya Vipraha Bahuda Vadanti. This is the greatness of our civilization, where we accept differing points of view without necessarily seeing them as an enemy of each other. Sudhanshuji is aware, I'm sure Ghanshyam is also, that Adi Shankaracharya and Mandan Mishra sat and had a debate on their differences. Ours has been a civilization of Sabya Samvad, civilized discourse. Again, we need to introspect. Today, have we become too brittle a republic? I'm not making an individual criticism, where immediately anyone who disagrees is either conflated with being an enemy of the nation or anti-national, or often put behind bars. Where is in Ekam Satya Vipraha Bahudanti? The truth is, one wise people call it by different names. Where is that sense of eclecticism, that sense of plurality? that sense of understanding that there can be differences which can be resolved through civilized discourse. So on that issue, I wanted to say I'm happy the Prime Minister spoke of the pride we must have in our past. We must ask ourselves, are we implementing it in the manner in which it should be done?
Pawan Verma used the phrase inclusiveness, and he spoke about an unnecessary and sterile divide. I completely agree with you, Mr. Pawan Verma. In the future, there must be, and in the present, there must be no unnecessary and sterile divide. And I'm completely aware that the Prime Minister used the word Ekta 11 times in his speech today. And you will agree with me, and I'm sure we will all hold hand and agree, there will be no divide when I hope very soon the Prime Minister takes the very necessary step of enforcing what was promised in the Constitution by having a uniform civil code. Believe me, Mr. Verma, you will agree with me, then there will be no divide in this country. You want to remove divide in this country, Mr. Verma, then the Prime Minister owes it to the country to bring in a uniform civil code and not waste any time in long debates over it.
Quick response, Arnab?
Yes.
In fact, the Uniform Civil Code is mandated by the Constitution as a desirable end. But I leave this question, and I am not getting into politics of it. Why has the BJP government in 8 years not brought a draft of what that civil code can be? Twice there was an initiative to introduce a bill. The BJP government withdrew it. I recall the Chairman Law Commission writing to chief ministers for their views, and many of them saying, we are willing to consider this and should also. But please tell us from which religion, what you will omit in order to have a draft available for discussion on the Uniform Civil Code. That has also not come so far.
I think I agree with you. The sooner it comes, the better. And I'm sure you'll be among the greatest supporters of a Uniform Civil Code. We all should be. Because this divisive politics, divided legal system cannot work. This has been an aggressive but very interesting debate. I wish you all a very happy Independence Day.